It definitely sounds like a widely expanding and rapidly growing business, and I think it's definitely good to see that there's still a demand for it and that it's definitely something that is being received very well. Shifting over, kind of going back a while for you, when did you decide that you wanted to get involved in the gaming industry?
Well, it's interesting. I spent my entire career in the game industry, and in fact, one of the cool things, most of my friends from the game industry, we all sort of grew up in this industry as the first generation of people who have never really done anything but this. When I started, most of the people that I worked for came from places like the toy industry or record labels or book publishing, things like that. But I look around now, and my friends and the people that we work with, this is kind of all that we've ever known.
So, on that note, what was your first job in the gaming industry?
So my first job in the game industry, actually, I guess, was working for myself, developing little games, during high school on a computer that I had in my bedroom. Put those games up on online services like CompuServe and ultimately the internet as that became more prevalent. And so it's always kind of been a personal passion of mine.
Very cool. Can you describe how you felt on your first day working at Microsoft?
Well, it's funny. The first day working at Microsoft was really, kind of both very, very exciting and very daunting. I got to Microsoft because I'd been working for a game publisher in the San Francisco Bay Area, and was spending a lot of time with the folks at Microsoft, trying to figure out how to develop and market and publish our games on Windows. And mostly spent a lot of time harassing those folks, telling them, look, you're not really doing it right. You're not giving us the kind of support that we get from Sony, from Sega, from Nintendo. And so the response to me was something like, well, you're so smart, you come figure it out. So I did, and it's kind of like being given the keys to a very expensive sports car. On the one hand, it's like really thrilling and really awesome. On the other hand, you're thinking to yourself constantly, don't wreck it, don't wreck it, don't wreck it. And so that was kind of what my first day was like, was a mix of kind of awe and fear and excitement and all kinds of different emotions all going on at the same time.
Yeah, I can only imagine a mix of emotions on a first day of a job like that. When would you say you were most satisfied in your career?
When was I most satisfied in my career? Well, it's hard to say. I'm pretty darn satisfied right now. The thing about Dave & Buster's is that not only, is it a great company to work for, very successful, growing, doing something that I considered, personally really, really cool, but also the people here are really spectacular. I mean, I honestly have yet to meet somebody in the company that I dislike, which is, I can't say that about any other time in my career. So I'm pretty satisfied now. Obviously, working at Microsoft was a real high point, and in particular, the very earliest days in putting together Xbox. And I can tell you, part of that has to do with the fact that when we first started putting that project together and pitching it inside the company, nobody inside the company thought we'd be successful, much less outside of it. The prevailing feeling, I believe, was something like, well, this is a great idea, but this is so unlike anything Microsoft's ever done before that, Gates and Ballmer, they're not going to let this go forward. So we were largely left alone to do our own thing. And a lot of what you see in Xbox even today came out of that period of time when we were kind of left alone, kind of shunned aside, and could really go out and spend a lot of time with game developers and publishers and gamers and try to figure out, well, how do we build something that would be really cool that people would like and want to develop games for or want to play games on. And so that was extremely satisfying because just the sense of pride and the sense of kind of ownership, the sense of being on a mission, on a crusade was something that you don't get very, very often.
Yeah, that's a very insightful look at it, and I think that's something that people, don't always look at, is from what it has started at to what it has, that can become today, and how much it's evolved over the time. As a co-creator of Xbox, how did you feel about the Xbox 360? What would you say you liked, and what would you say you didn't like about it?
The Xbox 360? Well, I think that there's obviously a lot to like about it. I think that the evolution of Xbox Live during the 360 generation has been really pretty spectacular, and I think that it's introduced a lot of concepts that today we take for granted. I think that obviously there were a couple of missteps early on in terms of the manufacturing. The reliability of the console is something that clearly comes to mind. I think that I was a little disappointed to see a slight step backwards in terms of the audio subsystem in the hardware. I think there was a view. We had a very advanced, very dedicated audio processor in the original Xbox. And I think when it came time to do the 360, I think there was a feeling that a lot of that work could be done by the CPU. And I think that was a clear disappointment. I think that, in addition, it's unfortunate that, when we originally spec'd the first Xbox, we decided to start from, the USB specification from an electrical standpoint, but to use a completely new connector for the controllers because, let's face it, the connector on a USB plug is not really the best. It has a tendency to, be pulled out pretty quickly and a lot of other things. But it was basically USB. With Xbox 360, it's, again, the same electrical interface, but also, again, it was USB 1.0, not USB 2.0. So as a result, when it came time to bring out Kinect, Kinect was putting all of its data through a USB 1.0 interface. That's a fairly slow speed interface. So that was a disappointment as well, but obviously these things are very small disappointments in the greater scheme of things, and probably something that, only a parent could think of.
Absolutely. That's a good way to look at it. It's a good way to refer to it. Mobile games have really expanded to platforms other than mobile in the past few years, PC, consoles, and even the arcade machine at Dave & Buster's. Do you think that we're going to continue to see this growth in mobile games?
Oh, of course. Absolutely. It's interesting to think about how, when I remember when I turned 21 and I could go drink in a bar legally, sitting there and kind of seeing these really cool little trivia machines and, then going to places and getting, the little remotes that you could take part in the trivia contest. And today, what the phones that each of us have in our pockets just kind of, from a capability standpoint, dwarf what those things offered. And so the idea that everybody that comes into a Dave & Buster's has, probably has something like that available to them, and how that transforms things, how that can augment your experience when you're actually in one of our locations and sort of provide almost like a second screen experience as we're starting to become more familiar with when we're watching television. What is a second screen experience like in an arcade? Or, how does your mobile device tie you back to Dave & Buster's location so that, you can continue to have that experience when you, when you're not there? How does it, allow you to keep track of things that are happening, and to continue to be involved in the fun when you're not around? I think it's tremendously exciting for me. And I think that we're starting to see that expressed both in an arcade setting like ours, but also in a home environment as well with consoles and, other types of TV connected devices.
So you mentioned a few things about when we first started talking about how the mobile app can be used to recharge the card. You mentioned a few things there, but how would you say mobile games are starting to integrate with Dave & Buster's, if any way at all?
Well, right now it's very, very early days in terms of that. A long time ago, obviously, arcades really led in terms of technological advances. And unfortunately, for a large number of reasons, I think that they've lost that leadership role. But I think that the manufacturers of arcade games have recognized that and are trying to catch up very quickly. I think mobile is just one piece of that. So I think, obviously today you see some integration in terms of, as I mentioned before, a number of the games that we rolled out in the last year actually had their start in the mobile space, but they've been supersized and they've been enhanced with the ability to win prizes and other sorts of things. And I think that's a clear connection. And it's not a surprising one when you consider that most mobile game developers are actually inspired by the play types that came out of the arcades, the quick play, the easy to learn, the one-handed control. All that sort of stuff was kind of pioneered in the arcade. In fact, arcade games are often looked at for inspiration when building a mobile game. But I think that, then it comes full circle when you see these things emerging and potentially tying in at some point, to mobile devices. Like I said, this is, a much longer term prospect when we look at what potentially could happen in the arcade space, because today each game is essentially, is an island. It's basically isolated. But I anticipate that changing, and you only have to look at the arcade business in Japan, where virtually every game is connected to the internet. You can store your progress. You can get access to modifications and customizations that you've made to your characters or vehicles, or, kind of play against other players or play against recorded sessions that were made by other players, that sort of thing. Those are all going to come to the U.S. It's going to take a little bit of time. But before you know it, I think a lot of that stuff will be here, and I think mobile will play a big role in how we interact with those kinds of experiences.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's something that's definitely going to help contribute to the success of establishments like Dave & Buster's, and just continue to help grow them, because it's something that exists in other aspects of the world, but something that hasn't been touched on. But in other places of the world, it has. So it just needs to make its way over. Would you mind explaining what a 4D game is, and how does it integrate into Dave & Buster's lineup of games?
I don't know that anybody can really explain what a 4D game is, except perhaps Namco. Dark Escape 4D is described as such because it combines a 3D visual experience. You put on a pair of antibacterial 3D glasses, and you're in this fully enveloping environment. Sitting, holding onto a gun grip that actually has can detect your heart rate and can change the gameplay based on how physiologically excited you are by the game. I think that the 4D aspect is something that's been coined to describe additional environmental or atmospheric effects. For example, when you're playing Dark Escape, particularly frightening parts of the game, compressed air will shoot out and kind of like tap you on the shoulder or the back of the neck. You have a fully immersive 3D audio experience. You have a lot of things that kind of go on in that environment that you're sitting in, that cabinet that you're sitting inside of, that kind of go beyond the 2D visual or auditory experience that you're having.
That sounds definitely like a full expansion on some of the earlier arcade games that have attempted to kind of bring in that 3D or full 360-degree game atmosphere. But this is just, combining everything together and, rolling out any issues that have been there. That definitely sounds like something that I could see successful and would want to try out. With recent Android-powered consoles like Ouya, GameStick, and NVIDIA's recently announced Project Shield, do you think mobile game consoles have the potential to replace standard consoles and the features they do for a lot of households?
No, I don't. I think that for some aspect, of gamers, for some component of gamers, that they'll get that potentially in addition to a traditional game console. But if you look at what game consoles provide, and if you look at the investment that's being made by the major game publishers to produce everything from Call of Duty to Last of Us to the next Halo, those are things that really are going to be on a more traditional console platform because of the investment that the console manufacturers make in building a very, very large audience for those games. At its core, the console business is really about creating that ecosystem, creating the audience and building that audience so that somebody feels comfortable investing tens of millions of dollars in developing a game because they know they have a shot at selling many times that amount when they actually go out into the marketplace. I think that it's really interesting that, the Android-powered consoles are coming out, and I'm a fan of them, don't get me wrong, but I think it's more about kind of taking that class of content to the television screen, much like what Apple's done with Apple TV, than it is about sort of replacing the traditional console.
I think that's a great aspect and a good way to look at it, and I absolutely agree with you on that. Shifting a little bit, can you give us an overview of what the next big game contest is?